Okay, now that we have kind of gone through and talked about ways you can spot intervals, I'm going to walk you through the process I go through. As I said, the first thing I do is I try to figure out the bass line to the best of my ability, because that informs everything pretty well. And so we're going to go through, I put some tracks together for the song Sweet Caroline by Neil Diamond, and I'm just going to play them through, and then we'll kind of listen to it for a minute here, and then I'll point out, what we're listening for, and kind of look at the bass here. So let's just start the tracks up for now, and then we'll get into the meat and potatoes here in just a second. Okay, so that was all the way through the first verse and the first chorus. Now, one of the tricks is going to be teaching yourself, and this is a skill that you get used to. You just have to try it over and over, and you get better at it, but you have to try the best of your ability to just listen to one thing happening in the mix. Okay, rather than the entire thing. And it can be really distracting, because especially when there's a singer there, the recordings are set up to kind of have your attention go to the singer. For example, where it began, well, I can't begin to knowing, but then I know it's growing strong. Spring, and so it was it can be a little bit difficult sometimes to isolate the bass in your ear, because the recordings are designed to have you listening to the singer. However, it can be done, and I think it's a lot easier to isolate the bass than it is something in the middle of the song, because the bass is at one of the extremes. It's down at the bottom end of the sound. So the first thing that we want to do is we wander around and try and find out what in the world this root noise is. So we come in and it says bum 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 bum, and the bass note that was being played is here. Bum 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 bum. Got a piano sound up here. And so that's the first thing we're looking for, is what is this root note? And you just have to match it with your ear. You have to play around. You might have to go. But it will eventually lock in. For instance, if I played it back and I started trying to, let's pretend like this is just a recording I have coming through my stereo, and I'm going to try and figure it out. close. No. No. Yeah. Once I got to the right note, it locked in. It didn't sound like I was out in left field anymore. The thing about playing from ear is that you have to learn to trust your ear. You see, most people don't trust their ear. They don't think that their ear is good enough to spot anything, but that's not true, okay? It is a skill that you develop, but think about this. Maybe you don't feel like you have a very sophisticated ear, and maybe you don't have perfect pitch. I don't have perfect pitch, okay? But you can't tell me that you don't know that there is a difference between this and this. You know that they're not the same, and that means that your ear is capable of locking in. You can trust your ear because your ear can recognize that different pitches sound different from each other. You know, and if you felt like you had, you know, if you felt like you were completely tone deaf, I don't think you'd probably be buying this video. So you have to search around and find the note that locks in and sounds correct with what you're playing. And in this case, it ends up being a G. For those of you who are Neil Diamond fans, I know that this song was actually written in B, but I didn't want to be using lots of sharps and flats, so I tuned it up. Not important. So we find that it's a G. So that's our starting point here. And if we listen closer, what we find out is that in the whole beginning of that, what the bass is doing is just playing on quarter notes. It's just going bum 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 bum. That's all it was doing. So we know that we're going to start out on a G in the bass, and that's what it's doing. Why is it important to know that? Well, when you start looking for what the chord might be, and you know that your bass note is a G, you're probably not going to guess that maybe it's an E chord, or it's a D flat, or it's an A flat. You know, you're not going to guess that to be the chord. You're going to guess it's going to be some kind of a G chord, or you might guess that it's some kind of a C chord because it's somewhat common to have the fifth of a chord in the bass. But that doesn't sound right if you play a C chord over it. But if you play a G chord with it, which is the first place you're usually going to go, as you look, you say the bass is a G, let's try a G chord. And a G major chord, holy cow, I think that's right. Bum ba dum, ba ba dum ba dum, ba ba dum. That's why I look for the bass first, because the bass will give me a lot of clues as to what the chords are going to be. So the whole section, the whole first section seems to just be on a G the entire time. Now I listen really close. Bum, 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 bum. So then I sing that note to myself, bum, and I was here, bum, bum. Now is where I refer to my little tricks, and I say, well, what does that sound like? Bum, bum, here comes the bride. That's a perfect fourth. A perfect fourth from G is a C, and so I go from here, bum, 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 bum. Okay? So that's a place where you can use your little tricks. Bum, bum, ba, bum. So that's what I do, is I sit and I listen to the bass line and I hum along with it And I find out where it's going. Bum 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 bum. And then I say to myself, so what is the distance between those two notes? Bum 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 ba bum. Here comes the bride. You know, holy cow, well it's a perfect fourth, and so I know if I'm starting on a G, I'm moving to a C. So where are we at here? So we're on a C. Oh, we just went up again, so let's see here. Bum 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 bum. The next pitch was bum bum bum. Again, that's a perfect fourth. Here comes the bride. So that's C to an F. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. That goes back down to a C. But part of that's because a minute ago I was on C and I remember it, but it could also be shave and a haircut. So we work our way back down. So the bass line so far has gone from here to here, then to here, then it went back down to here. Okay, there was our next bum bum bum. So we were here and then it went bum 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 bum. That's like Twinkle Twinkle. That's a perfect fifth. Okay, so now I'm on a G. So that's what we do. So we're walking along, and so if we've ascertained by playing around with the bass line, and we find out that where it's going is we start on G, then we end up on a C, then F, then C, then G. Now that gives us a framework to work with. What might those chords be? Well, there's a few different options, but the first place to start is make the bass the root of the chord and just see how it comes out. So where you're playing a G in the bass, play a G chord. A G. I start with major and then work out to minor. And I'll give you some tips on how to spot where it might be minor or major later. But so you start out, we were on a G and we're playing a G chord. Let's see how that sounds. Well, there's some intricacies we're leaving out, but that's about right, isn't it? Now let's play a C chord over the C bass and see how it sounds. Where it began, and lo and behold, we're correct. Then we'll try an F chord over the F bass. I can't begin to knowin'. And we're back down to a C. We'll try a C chord again. But then I know it's growing strong. And then we're on a G chord. So why is all this important? By learning the bass, I just did about 90% of my work. By learning the bass, then I was able to guess right away. I just went with the tonic chords, basically. If I played a G, I played a G chord. If I played a C, I played a C chord. If I played an F, in this case, I was right. But if I hadn't been right, I still have some framework to go by, because I know that a G is a part of, I know what a G is a part of as far as other chords. I know that it's the fifth of a C chord. I know that it's the major third of an E flat major chord. I know it's the minor third of an E minor chord. And I know that it is, well, those are the main things. Most of the time occasionally you're going to see a really strange bass, but a lot of times, for the most part, the bass line is either going to be the root of the chord, it'll be the fifth of the chord, or the third of the chord. So right there, if I know it's a G bass, there's probably about an 80 to 90% chance that it's either going to be a G chord, a C chord, an E flat major chord, or an E minor chord. Or I suppose it could be a G minor chord or a C minor chord, but again, those are just the minor versions of the same thing that we've already played. So that really gives me, it limits it. It's not like it could be any of the 12 chords available. It's going to be one of those almost every time. So that's why I learned the bass line first, because here I was on G, and my first guess ended up being right on what the chord was. And then when I moved to C, I tried a C chord and it ended up being right. But just like we just talked about, if it hadn't been right, I know that a C is the fifth of an F chord. I know that it's the major third of an A flat chord. And it's the minor third of an A minor chord. You know, so it's probably either going to be something, either a C or a C minor, or an F or an F minor. I think it's most likely that it'll be one of the root, the root of the chord. And then it's second most likely that it'll be the fifth of the chord. So in this case, if it's a C, the first thing I'm going to look for is it going to be one of the C chords, either a C major or a C minor, or is it going to be an F major or an F minor, because C is the tonic of a C chord and it's the fifth of an F chord. So those are the most common things it's going to be, and then it might be the third. So it kind of limits me, and it gives me a framework to work by. So that's why I learned the bass first, and I just listen along. And most of the time, the other advantage of learning the bass is that in most rock, pop, and country, the bass is not going to be all that complicated. It's usually going to be following kind of a simple pattern. So it gives you less notes and less movement to have to try and learn. And that's another advantage of it. So that's why we listen for the bass first. Once we have listened to the bass, then there's a couple of things that you can do. This is a part where I like to talk about chords and how to identify what kind of a chord you might be playing here. I mentioned this in the Understanding Chord Symbols video, but I'm going to go through it one more time here. Major chords have a happy sound to them. You see? Minor chords have a sad sound to them. You hear the difference? That's bright and happy. That's darker, more mellow, and kind of sad. You know, it's like one makes you want to do the cheesy grin I just did, like this. And the other one makes you want to frump your face at your lower lip out. So try and get used to thinking of that. Does it sound like it's happy? Does it sound like it's sad? Because that's going to give you some indications of whether you're playing a major or a minor chord. Now occasionally you're going to hear a diminished chord, and a diminished chord doesn't really sound sad. It sounds, I think it sounds villainous, or you know, diabolical almost. I mean, you hear that? That sounds like, you know, in the old movies, if you were watching a silent movie and someone hit this chord, then all of the actors would be going. You know, I mean, that's... So when you hear that sound, that's kind of sinister. It's not really sad. This is sad. This is much more sheer. You know, and it makes you think of a woman screaming, "Ah!" And then there's the augmented chord, which to me the augmented chord sounds as though an alien ship has just landed in your backyard. So why do I tell you this? Because as you're listening to songs, the mood that is being set by the chord progression can help you to learn it by ear, because after you've learned the bass line, if you can kind of hear the mood that's happening in the song, it's going to give you some indication of whether you're playing major, minor. Mostly you'll be playing major and minor. Occasionally, just occasionally, you'll hear diminished and augmented, but they do have their own sound. So start with that. Start with the notion that there is a difference between this sound, which is the happy major sound, and this sound, which is the sad minor sound, and this sound, which is the sinister diminished sound, and this sound, which is the kind of creepy extraterrestrial sound. You know? Or the other way to look at it too, if you ask me, would be that if this is a very overt villain, you know, this is the I'm out there and I'm proud and you know, this is the guy who cusses a lot and just, you know, fires a lot of bullets into people. This is the theme song for the villain who is, you know how they always put villains in these movies that are maybe a little bit sophisticated and refined, and they wear a three-piece suit and they speak with a very educated vernacular and all of that, and you know, you're not even sure that you believe that they're as awful as they end up being in the film. There's a sort of a shock and awe, kind of a surprise, almost like a zombie. I can't believe he did that kind of sound to this. That's how I distinguish between diminished and augmented chords. So if you can kind of get those things in your head, along with these tips on how to spot intervals, then that really goes a long way in helping. Because, for instance, the beginning of The Dance by Garth Brooks. That's a very kind of a sad sound. And it should be, because that's all being done in an E minor framework. Now all of a sudden this sounds a little bit happier. But that's a major chord. So just to give you an example, that's kind of how you can find out, or how these things go. I mean, take the song by the Eagles. The Eagles have a great song called like I know my own name here, folks, sorry. One of These Nights is what it's called, okay? You know, one of these nights, one of these crazy long nights, gonna find out, pretty mama, what it's all about. I've been searching for the daughter of the devil himself. I've been searching for an angel in white. Now that whole song has kind of a of, I don't know, it's got a dark sound to it. I don't know if I'd call it sad, but it's got a very dark sound to it. As opposed to if I played it in major chords, listen to how different it sounds. One of these nights, one of these crazy long nights, gonna find out pretty mama what turns on at nights. I've been waiting for the daughter of the devil himself. I've been searching for an angel in white. Now I've been looking for a woman who's a little bold, and I can feel it, but she's nowhere in sight. You see how it's got a totally different feel when you play that in major chords. But it's got a very dark feel the way they did it, that kind of boom, boom, boom. Almost all of that's minor chords. So I'm not really doing this to teach you specific songs or anything. It's just I'm trying to give you some examples so you can start to recognize the mood and the feel of a song, because that really helps to identify, are we playing a lot of major chords, are we playing a lot of minor chords, or you know, what kind of mood is the music setting, and then that gives you some hints after you learn the bass line what in the world you're going to be playing. A song like Brown Eyed Girl, the whole thing is a very happy-go-lucky, bright sound. You know, hey, where did we go? The days when the rains came, out in Hollow, playing a new game. You know, thing is major chords because it's very bright, it's very happy, like I said, very happy-go-lucky. So those are just a couple examples. I can give you another good example is here come flat top, he come grooving up slowly. He want walrus gumbo, he want Coca-Cola, he said on and one is three. Got to be a joker, he gets so hard to see. Okay, now that's got kind of a little bit of a darker sound to it. It's not really minor, but that has another sound. It's got what I'd call a rebellious sound. And rebellious sounds tend to include dominant sevenths, which you're going to hear a lot of too. Although that's not terribly important for our purposes today, but rebellious songs can have minor chords or major chords. But they do have a sound all their own. So start when you're listening to songs, if you want to play by ear, start kind of trying to identify what kind of mood is being cast by it, you know? Old Time Rock and Roll by Bob Seger is a bright and happy song. This Taylor's old records on the shelf, I sit and listen to them by myself. Same soul, how about that old time rock and roll? But then you take another song from his catalog, like Turn the Page. You know, where would we be at? That whole thing is incredibly dark. Well, down west of Omaha, down 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 down, and I smoked the day's last cigarette. Down and down and down. Here I am on the road again. Here I am mean, that's a very, very dark sound. So that indicates lots of minor chords here, but over here on I like my old time rock and roll, lots of major chords there. And so those are things that you need to be paying attention to as well, because it will make it a lot faster for you to determine what in the heck you're going to be playing. Sorry about that, I was just plugging the battery cable in on my camera there. It'll make it a heck of a lot easier for you to determine what in the world you're going to be playing when you can determine what mood is being set by the music, because that will indicate whether it's major chords, minor chords, sinister chords, or creepy chords. So that's one thing that we want to do. So we want to try and identify the bass line first. Hum the bass line to yourself, listen to it, try to hum the changes, and then use your tips from the intervals to figure it out. You know, your Here Come the Bride. And then you also want to know what kind of mood is being cast by the song. Is it a dark song? Is it a bright and happy song? Is it a creepy song? Is it a sinister song? Because that's going to give you a lot of hints as to, you know, what kinds of chords you're going to be playing. And then your bass line is going to give you all kinds of food for thought on what the chords might be, because if it's a G, there's a good chance it's going to be a G chord, whether it be major or minor, you know, or it might be a C chord because G is part of a C chord, those kinds of things. So those are the first two things that we look at. In the next section, what I'm going to talk to you about is common chord progressions, and those will also help you identify things faster, because there's a lot of patterns that get repeated a lot in popular music. So I'll see you there.